Lore of the Old World, Episode 3, War and Conquest. In the aftermath of the war against Chaos, the young races ventured forth into the world once more, reclaiming lost lands and rediscovering lost colonies. In this era of bold exploration, powerful allies would be formed. Yet the corruption of Chaos was not banished from the world, and jealousy would soon give way to corruption. At the height of their powers, the elves and dwarves would descend into bitter conflict, and war would once more ravage the old world. Under the rule of Bel-Shanaar, a great age of exploration and expansion begun for the elves of Ulthuan, and many new colonies were planted across the face of the world. In the old world, the dwarves were similarly engaged in conquest and growth, pushing their domains east into the Great Skull Land, and west into the lands of the primitive human tribes. On the coast of the lands that would one day become known as Bretonnia, the elves and dwarfs met again. Quickly the friendship formed long ago between Kallador Dragontamer and Grimnir was re-established, and both races mourned to hear of the loss of such great leaders, while celebrating the tales of their heroism and their roles in ending the war against Chaos. Bel-Shanaar personally visited the new colonies and even ventured to Karazakarak in the World's Edge Mountains to swear the oath of friendship with the dwarf kings. Malerion, the son of Anarion, became his ambassador there and a trusted friend of the dwarfs. As the elves and dwarfs spread and multiplied across the face of the world, wealth flowed into their growing empires. The elven cities and dwarf holds were rebuilt following the long war, growing in size and splendor and becoming places of beauty and wonder once again. Unbeknownst to the elves, Chaos had returned to Ulthuan in insidious new guise, spreading through a web of secret cults of luxury and pleasure. At the centre of this web was Malerion, who had long harboured a deep jealousy of Bel-Shanaar and believed the Phoenix Crown was his birthright. Returning to Ulthuan on the pretense of revealing this creeping evil, Malerion plotted the downfall of Bel-Shanaar, planning his assassination before accusing the Phoenix King of being a cultist himself. With Bel-Shanaar's death, the son of Anarion believed all he needed to do to claim the throne was to step into the sacred fires of Asuryan and prove his worthiness. Yet the treasonous elf proved unworthy, and he was cast from the flames horribly burned and scarred. With Malerion's betrayal, the elf realms were plunged into a bitter civil war. The wounded traitor fled north with his followers to Nagarath. In his wake, frantic consultations were held between the now leaderless princes of Ulthuan. It was decided that the third Phoenix King would be Imric, the grandson of Kallador Dragontamer, who, upon his succession, took the name Kallador and would be known as Kallador the Conqueror. Scarcely had Kallador been affirmed when the armies of Nagarath swept down from their grim realm, bearing the banner of the Dread King before them. Thus did a civil war engulf Ulthuan and its colonies. The bitter war between the Phoenix Court and the followers of Malerion was to rage for several centuries. As the conflict ground on, the Dread King brooded upon his many defeats, growing mad with jealousy as yet another impostor wore the Phoenix Crown, whilst he lived as an outcast, and he plotted an unthinkable revenge. Evil pacts were struck in Nagarath, and from the brooding skies the laughter of dark gods could be heard. At the culmination of a moonlit ritual, the Dread King attempted to unbind the cosmic vortex and unleash the realm of chaos upon Ulthuan. Yet the power that had been invoked by Kallador Dragontamer and his mages was too great for the likes of Malerion to unravel. Briefly the vortex flared with the radiance of 1,000 suns before growing momentarily dark. At this moment, a terrible wave of malefic energy was unleashed across Ulthuan, causing a great tidal wave that engulfed Nagarath, devastating the land and toppling cities. As much of northern Ulthuan disappeared under the torrent, the earth quaked, causing the jagged cliffs to crumble and great tracts of the coastline to fall into the raging seas. As the land of Nagarath sank, renegade wizards in the court of the Dread King harnessed great sections of the splintering land. Aboard these great black arks, Malerion and his followers fled northwards, even as the vortex flickered once more into life. Yet the damage was done. A ferocious storm of magic had been unleashed, however briefly, bringing with it untold destruction to Ulthuan. In the Old World, news of the Elven Civil War had reached the ears of the dwarfs, though they failed to comprehend the severity of the news. To the dwarfs, treachery and kinslaying were alien concepts, and no dwarf would ever break an oath to a king. Consequently, the dwarf kings had opted to stay out of the conflict and refused to take sides. Yet when warriors of Ulthuan began to raid dwarf caravans, the dwarves were dragged into the conflict. Enraged at such aggression, High King Gotrek Starbreaker sent his ambassador to the court of the Phoenix King, now Keldor II, the son of Keldor the Conqueror, to demand explanation and recompense. But the brash young Phoenix King quickly grew frustrated and ordered Gotrek's ambassador shaved and thrown from his court. This terrible insult could not be ignored, and the dwarfs were roused to anger. At the High King's command, mighty throngs gathered and marched against the elven colonies of the Old World. In the centuries that followed, many elven cities were besieged, all falling to the might of the dwarfs. Conquered cities were razed and their inhabitants driven into the sea. With each victory, the High King solemnly struck a single entry from the Great Book of Grudges, the huge tome in which all wrongs done to the dwarf race were recorded. Yet there remained more grudges to settle, and it was not until Keldor II was slain by Gotrek Starbreaker and the Phoenix Crown claimed as a trophy that the dwarfs considered the matter settled.